After his wife's passing, their familiar world at home seemed to shatter, but the most painful blow for the head of the family was the estranged gaze of his own daughter. 16-year-old Mira, consumed by a fire of grief and resentment, couldn't stand her father's presence. She would defiantly slam doors, cutting off any attempts at conversation, and looked at him with undisguised hostility. The girl didn't just avoid communication, she seemed to harbor a deep aversion towards him. One evening, while going through his daughter's things, the man discovered a dusty box hidden under the bed. Heavy, with remnants of old tape, it contained a dozen audio cassettes, neatly arranged in a row. Initially, he assumed it was just a music collection, perhaps bought at a thrift store, or something his daughter didn't want him to see. However, upon inserting the first cassette into a player and pressing play, he heard not music, but his wife's voice. It was Leora, sounding clear and steady, as if she had never left this world. Her first words made the man's heart stop. "If you're listening to this, then there's something you need to know." A chill ran down his spine. Leora's voice held no playfulness, no casualness. It was the tone of a woman harboring a profound secret, one she hadn't shared even with him. "This message isn't for me, but for Mira," she said. In that moment, the father realized the truth hidden on these tapes had the power to change everything. His wife's revelations could not only unveil a family secret but also shatter his daughter's life. With Leora's death, the world lost its vibrant colors. Their home, once filled with laughter and music, became a lifeless shell, echoing with sorrow. Mornings were especially difficult. Before, the head of the household would wake to the sound of her singing in the kitchen or the clatter of dishes as she prepared Mira's breakfast before school. Now, silence pressed against the walls like a heavy blanket. Each morning, he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, knowing he had to get up, but dreading the emptiness that awaited him downstairs. Mira changed overnight. She had always been very close to her mother. They shared secrets, whispered in the kitchen while baking cookies, and stayed up late watching movies with bowls of popcorn on their laps. Sometimes her father joined these moments, but it was clear the strongest bond was between mother and daughter. After Leora's death, Mira lost not only her mother, but also her best friend. In her eyes, her father became the villain who couldn't save her. He tried to be patient, giving his daughter space, but the distance between them grew daily. She would rush past him in the hallway without a word. At dinner, she barely touched her food, eyes glued to her phone, turning away from him as if he were a stranger. To questions about her day, she'd snap, "Fine," a tone that cut like glass. If he tried to remind her of chores, she'd explode, "You're not Mom, stop pretending you care." These words stung. He wanted to scream back that he did care, that he loved her more than life, that Leora's loss had devastated him too. However, he held back his anger, understanding that what his daughter needed wasn't that, but patience. Still, it wasn't easy to remain calm when every glance from Mira was filled with resentment. A carpenter by trade, after Leora's death, the man buried himself in work. Sawdust and the hammer's clang muffled the pain inside, but returning home, he felt a silence louder than any noise. Mira usually locked herself in her room, and the loud music filtering through the thin walls made it clear she didn't want to see him. Sometimes he stood at her door, raising a hand to knock, but then lowering it, unsure what words to choose that wouldn't make things worse. The house was full of reminders of Leora. In the living room, her favorite throw blanket still lay on the back of the sofa, untouched since her death. Shelves were filled with books, their spines worn from years of reading. The faint scent of her perfume lingered in the bedroom air, despite the months that had passed. It felt like she was everywhere and nowhere all at once. Mira avoided these things, refusing to look at photos or touch her mother's belongings, saying it hurt too much. For her father, keeping them untouched was the only way to feel her presence near. His parents lived in neighboring towns, but his mother, Marion, never missed an opportunity to support him with phone calls, urging him not to lose hope in his relationship with Mira. She reminded him that adolescence often brings rebellion, and grief makes people say hurtful things. His father, Thomas, was more reserved, but his words carried weight. "Your job isn't to be perfect, but to keep being there, even when she pushes you away." He clung to these words, though sleepless nights sometimes made him doubt his competence as a father and a man. The most painful thing was Mira's unwillingness to talk about her mother, as if silence could stifle the pain. But grief doesn't disappear by being silenced, it only corrodes from within. He yearned for Mira to open up, share memories, cry out her sorrow in his arms as she had as a child. But she had built impenetrable walls around her heart, and he couldn't find a way in. One Saturday, he decided to tidy his daughter's room while she was out with friends. It wasn't so much an invasion of privacy as a desperate attempt to bring order to the chaos raging in her soul. Clothes strewn on the floor, school books piled on the desk, half-filled notebooks tucked under the bed, everything spoke of her inner turmoil. He hoped to create a space where she could feel peace, not suffocation. As he sorted through her things, he couldn't help but wonder if she would ever forgive him for what he couldn't prevent. Everywhere he saw echoes of Leora, paintings Myra had done under her mother's guidance, a jewelry box given for her 12th birthday, a family sketch from elementary school. It was painful to realize how tightly Mira clung to things that reminded her of her mother, while rejecting him, the only remaining family member. In the process of cleaning, he stumbled upon a box hidden deep under the bed, almost imperceptible. Lifting it, he was enveloped in a cloud of dust. The box was old and sturdy. Inside lay cassettes, each signed in Leora's neat handwriting, dates, titles, short notes. His hands trembled as he read the inscriptions. These weren't just random recordings, they were messages. At that moment, he didn't know what these cassettes contained or why they were hidden, but he understood they held Leora's voice, her presence, a part of her he seemed to have lost forever. Holding the cassettes, he felt a mix of fear and hope stir within him. Perhaps these recordings would help him and Mira reconnect, become the bridge they so desperately needed. He was mistaken when he first picked up the box of cassettes. He didn't know what to do. His hands trembled as he traced the neat inscriptions with his fingers. The handwriting was unmistakably Leora's, the same ornate script she used for greeting cards and shopping lists. He hadn't seen her handwriting in months, and its sight brought a wave of grief crashing over him. He sat on Mira's bed with the box on his lap, looking at the cassettes as if they held the last fragments of his wife's soul. He pulled out the top cassette. In blue ink on a white label were the words, "From Mira, age 16. His breath caught. This wasn't just any cassette, it was meant for her. The date written in the corner matched the current year. Leora had planned it all. She had recorded something for their daughter to hear now at this age. He should have put it back. He should have closed the box, tucked it back under the bed, and walked away. But grief has a way of stripping one's will. He desperately wanted to hear her voice again, to feel her presence, if only for a moment. So, he found an old cassette player they kept in the closet and pressed play. The room filled with the hissing sound of static. Then her voice came through, warm, soft, and painfully familiar. "If you're listening to this," she said, "there's something you need to know." His chest tightened as if someone had gripped it with both hands. For a second, he almost felt as if she was right there in the room with him. Her words carried weight. They were careful, deliberate, not like the casual recordings she made when she wanted to save ideas for her art projects. This was different. This was a confession, a message. Then, like a bolt from the blue, words rang out that froze him in a daze. "This message is for you, Mira, not for your father." The man immediately stopped the recording, his hands trembling so violently he nearly dropped the player. The phrase, "not for your father," echoed in his mind, emphasizing that he shouldn't be hearing these revelations, that he had no right to intrude on his late wife's private space. He stared into space, torn by conflicting emotions. On one hand, guilt for eavesdropping, on the other, an irresistible need to know the truth. His beloved had left something sacred for their daughter, and he shouldn't be touching it. But how could he stop when she was no longer there? It was the only way to hear her voice, the only thread connecting him to her. Gathering his courage, he pressed play again. Leora's voice was slow, as if each word was difficult for her to utter. "Mira, when you reach this age, questions will inevitably arise in your heart. There are things I've kept silent about because the time wasn't right yet. But if you're listening now, it means you're ready to know the truth." The man stopped the recording again, feeling his pulse quicken in his temples. Truth? What truth? Leora had always been open with him, or so he thought. They shared everything, or rather, he genuinely believed they did. What could she have been hiding? Something she couldn't tell him while she was alive? For a long time, he sat in silence, staring at the cassette player. His instincts told him to stop, to give the cassette to Mira and let her hear her mother's message at the appointed time. But another thought immediately arose. Mira hated him. She would never listen to the recording if he gave it to her. More likely, she would just throw it away out of spite, and everything her mother wanted to convey to her would be lost forever. If this truth was so important that Leora decided to record it before her death, he couldn't allow that to happen. He took another cassette from the box labeled, "For Mira, age 12. Inserting it into the player, he pressed play again. Static hissed, then Leora's voice came through. "My sweet girl, you're growing up so fast. There will come a day when you wonder why I made certain decisions. I want you to know that everything was done out of love. Life doesn't always go as planned. Sometimes we have to carry burdens we wish we could shed." After a brief pause, she uttered words that made the man's hair stand on end. "There was someone before your father. Someone I hoped to keep, but he left. That choice, and everything that followed, is why you came into this world. Someday you'll understand." He abruptly pressed stop, and the player clicked loudly. His heart pounded wildly. Someone before your father. This wasn't about a fleeting crush. It was something more. The way she said those words, how her voice trembled on choice, indicated this wasn't just a story of youthful love. This was a confession concerning the very essence of Mira's life. The ground seemed to give way beneath him. What had she hidden from him? What had she hidden from their daughter? And why had she decided to leave this message for Mira to learn everything without his involvement? He sat, his face buried in his hands, the cassette player lying beside him on the bed. His chest tightened with a mix of grief, fear, and betrayal. He thought he knew his wife better than anyone. He believed their marriage was built on honesty, that they had overcome every difficulty together. But it turned out there was something she had kept secret, something she chose not to share with him. The internal conflict intensified with each passing second. Should he continue listening, knowing he was crossing a line? Or should he give the cassettes to Mira, risking that she would reject them? If the secret contained in these recordings proved painful, could she handle it? He tried to imagine Mira's face when she heard her mother's words. Would she hate him even more for keeping it from her, or for revealing the truth too soon? His hands trembled as he held the cassette. It felt as if he was holding a live wire, capable of striking them both irreversibly. One thing he knew for sure, everything recorded on these cassettes could change everything he thought about his wife, his daughter, and their family. And once the truth was out, there would be no turning back. That night, after the revelations from the first cassettes, sleep eluded him. He lay motionless, staring at the ceiling, the cassette player on the nightstand like a silent accuser. Leora's words, like a haunting melody, played over and over in his mind. Someone before your father. The tremor in her voice, captured on tape, indicated that this wasn't just a page from the past, but something deeply connected to Mira, something impossible to ignore. Thoughts flickered in his mind of putting the cassettes back, pretending nothing had happened. Perhaps the secret would remain buried under layers of time. But as soon as he closed his eyes, Mira's image appeared before him, her angry gaze, the distance that had grown between them. What if this secret was the key to her estrangement? What if it was this that would open the way to understanding her, even if it came at the cost of pain? Drawn by an unseen force, he got out of bed, returned to the box, and took out the next cassette. It was labeled, "For Mira, age 15. His hands trembled as he inserted it into the player, and Leora's voice filled the room. "Mira, if you're hearing this, it means you're almost grown up. By now, you've probably started asking questions about yourself, about your origins. There are things I wanted to tell you in person, but fear held me back. I was afraid of how it would change your perception of me, and even more afraid of how it would affect your view of your father." After a pause that made him hold his breath, she continued, "The truth is, the man who raised you is not your biological father. Your real father is a man I once loved, long before I met Aaron. His name was Jonas. When I found out I was pregnant, Jonas disappeared, unwilling to take responsibility. I chose Aaron because I knew he was strong enough to love a child who wasn't his by blood. He accepted you as his daughter even before your first breath. Pressing stop, he covered his face with his hands. Leora's words pierced him like a dagger. For 16 years, he had considered Mira his daughter in every sense of the word, and now the truth was revealed. They were bound not by blood, but by choice. His wife had chosen him to raise her daughter, and he had accepted that role, unaware of the truth. A feeling of betrayal mingled with deep fear. What would happen to Mira when she found out about this? She already hated him, blamed him for all her troubles. Would she leave entirely, knowing he wasn't her real father? Would she see him only as a deceiver? In the darkness of the room, with the cassette in the player, he felt an emptiness in his chest and a lump in his throat. Part of him wanted to destroy these recordings, erase them from reality, to spare Mira from a truth that could break her. But another part, remembering the quiet strength in Leora's voice, understood that she hadn't left these messages for no reason. She believed Mira needed to hear them. The next morning, Mira sensed a change in his demeanor. Coming down for breakfast, she silently took a piece of toast without looking at him and snapped, "Stop going through my things." His heart ached. She knew he had been in her room. "I was just trying to help," he replied softly. She turned and looked at him with undisguised fury. "Don't help me. Don't touch her things. You don't know anything about me." Her words cut deeper than she could imagine. She was right, more than ever before. He wanted to blurt out the truth. "I know more about you than you think." But he held back, knowing neither she nor he was ready for it. At work that day, he couldn't focus. Every hammer blow, every saw sound echoed in his head with Leora's words, "Not your father, Jonas." A choice. Driving home, he gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. He wrestled with a storm ready to erupt within him. That evening, he returned to the box again. More cassettes remained, like locked doors awaiting their turn. He promised himself he'd listen to just one, but he knew it was a lie. He needed to hear everything, understand the whole truth, before Mira did. The next cassette was labeled, "For Mira, age 16, Part 2. Leora's voice was calm but insistent. "If you're listening to this, Mira, you deserve to know the whole truth. I wanted to tell you in person, but I didn't have the courage. Jonas is your biological father, but he is not your dad. Your dad is Aaron. He is the man who stayed, who raised you, who will always love you as his daughter. Never let blood make you doubt that." Tears welled up in his eyes at her words. For a moment, he felt relief, as if she had protected him, acknowledged his role in Mira's life, but that relief was buried under a mountain of fear. Mira wouldn't see it that way. She was full of anger, grief, and rebellion. Would she hear words of his love now, or only betrayal? The moment of truth arrived when the realization that he couldn't keep the terrible secret to himself became unbearable. What he had heard couldn't simply be ignored. Every interaction with Mira was now tainted by this knowledge. Every time she called him Dad, it raised questions about sincerity, about whether she would take her words back once she knew the truth. That night, the decision finally solidified. The cassettes wouldn't be destroyed, but they couldn't be handed over blindly either. He needed to listen to everything to understand Leora's true message, and only then decide how to present the truth to Mira. This was perhaps the most difficult choice, for no matter what was revealed, life would never be the same again. On a night when his world felt ready to collapse, he found himself in Mira's room again. She was at a friend's house, and he hoped he had enough time. Sitting on the floor, cross-legged, he held the last cassette from the box. By then, almost all the recordings had been played, and a story he never thought he'd hear was piecing itself together. Leora's voice resonated in each cassette, sometimes steady, sometimes trembling, but always with a heaviness that pressed on his chest. And now, only the last recording remained, labeled, "For Mira, the Finale." Inserting the cassette into the player, he pressed play and braced himself to listen. After the static, the familiar voice filled the room. "Mira, this is my last message to you. If you're listening to this, it means I wasn't able to tell you in person. You need to know that everything I did was to protect you. I hid the truth from you, wanting you to feel safe and loved. But secrets aren't forever, and this one is too important." A lump in his throat made it hard to breathe. He leaned closer, trying not to miss a word. Leora continued, "You grew up believing Aaron was your father. And he is, in every sense of the word. He was there when you took your first steps, said your first words, went to school. He hugged you when you cried. He worked tirelessly to give you a home, and he loved you more than life. But you deserve to know the truth about your origins. Jonas is the man who gave you life. He left before you were born, and I raised you with Aaron because he was there. Don't let this knowledge change your perception of yourself, and don't let it take away the love Aaron gave you." Tears blurred his vision. The protection in her words gave him strength but also intensified his fear. Mira could perceive it differently, see betrayal, abandonment, lies. At that moment, the door burst open. Mira stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her eyes flashing with lightning. "I knew it," she hissed through clenched teeth. "I knew you were going through my things. What are you doing in here?" Clumsily pressing stop, he felt his heart pound wildly. "Mira, wait. You need to hear this." She lunged forward, trying to snatch the player, but he held it tightly. "Get out of my room," she screamed. "You never listen. You never respect me. You're pathetic, sitting here listening to Mom's tapes like some pervert." Her words struck like a hammer. He wanted to defend himself, to shout that she didn't understand what was on those tapes, but he forced himself to speak firmly. "This isn't about me, it's about you. These cassettes are for you. Your mother wanted you to hear them." Mira froze, her hand suspended over the player. "What are you talking about?" "Please," he pleaded, feeling his voice tremble. "Just sit down and listen. Let her tell you herself." After a long pause, during which her chest heaved with anger, she sank onto the bed. He pressed play again, and Leora's voice once more filled the tense silence. "Mira, you will always be my greatest love, and you need to know that Aaron is your father, not by blood, but by choice. Blood doesn't raise a child. Blood doesn't sit by your bedside at night when you're sick, doesn't work overtime to buy you school supplies, doesn't hug you when you're hurting. Aaron did those things. He is your father because he chose you, because he never left." Mira's face contorted as the meaning of the words dawned on her. Her lips parted, but she made no sound. She stared at the player as if it were a window into another world. Mira's world collapsed in an instant as Leora, like a merciless executioner, delivered her final blow. "Jonas gave you life," her words rang out like a verdict, "but he gave nothing more. He didn't want you, Mira. That was his decision, not yours. Never let his absence make you feel incomplete. Don't doubt your worth, and remember that Aaron is your true father." The cassette fell silent, leaving behind only a ringing emptiness. Tears filled Mira's eyes, and her voice was hoarse with shock. "You knew, didn't you? You knew and kept it from me." He hastily shook his head, trying to calm her. "No, I swear, I didn't know until I heard these recordings. Your mother never told me. I found them by accident, just like you. And when I heard her words, I couldn't stop. I needed to know, to understand." She covered her face with her hands, trying to shield herself from the truth that had crashed down. "So, everything I believed was a lie. You're not even my real father." He moved closer, feeling his hands tremble. "Look at me, Mira. I may not be the one who gave you life, but I'm the one who raised you. I'm the one who was always there. Every scraped knee, every school project, every birthday, every Christmas, I was there. That's what it means to be a father." Her eyes, red from crying, met his. "Then why didn't she tell me? Why didn't she tell us?" He swallowed hard, feeling his own tears sting his eyes. "Because she was afraid. She thought she was protecting you, protecting us. But she wanted you to know the truth when you were old enough to understand." Mira turned away, her shoulders shaking. For the first time in years, he saw not only her anger, but also her pain, and he understood this was a turning point. Either they would be utterly destroyed, or they would begin to rebuild on the ruins of this truth. When the recording ended, Mira sat motionless, hunched over, her face buried in her hands. The silence in the room pressed harder than any scream. He froze, afraid that any movement would push her away, that she would hate him even more. But he couldn't stand by, seeing her pain. Slowly he reached out and touched her forearm. She flinched, but didn't pull away. That small sign gave him hope. "Mira," he said softly, "you are my daughter. That will never change. No revelations from your mother will undo what we've been through together." She looked up at him, her eyes swollen with tears. "You should have told me as soon as you knew." "I wanted to," he admitted, "but I was afraid. Afraid that you would hate me for not being the one who gave you life. Afraid of losing you forever. I thought I needed to process everything before talking to you. I was wrong." Her lips trembled and she whispered, "I don't even know who I am now. I thought my whole life I was yours." "You are mine," he replied firmly. "Not by blood, but because I chose you every single day. When your mother told me she was pregnant, I had no doubts. I knew I wanted to be your father, and I've never regretted it once." Tears streamed down her cheeks, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed him to hug her. At first she resisted, stiff in his embrace, but then she broke, and her body shook with sobs. He held her tightly, feeling years of grief and anger pour out of her. That night they sat together for hours, talking about Leora, about the cassettes, about the truth she had hidden. Mira asked questions he had no answers for. Where was Jonas now? Why did he abandon them? Did he ever think of her? All he could do was tell her what he knew. Jonas had left, and her mother had chosen to shield her from that pain by giving her a father who would never leave her. In the weeks that followed, healing didn't happen overnight. Mira still struggled with her anger. She slammed doors, snapped, and pulled away when emotions became too overwhelming. But something had shifted. In her gaze, there was no longer just hatred. He saw confusion, sadness, and deep within, a faint glimmer of trust. In silence, as if burdened by unspoken words, father and daughter lived side by side, separated by a wall of mistrust. One evening, during the routine of washing dishes, his daughter broke the prolonged silence. "Dad," she said, her voice hesitant, as if each word was fragile, "do you think Mom was right? Do you really believe blood ties are what matters most?" The father, wiping his hands on a towel, turned to her. "I know for certain that they're not. What matters is who comes into your life, who stays by your side, who loves you unconditionally. That's what creates a family. That's what makes a father real." His daughter nodded slowly, tears glistening in her eyes, and though she said nothing more, the father felt something shift within her. Over time, they developed their own quiet ritual, listening to the cassettes with her mother's voice together. Instead of him sneaking into her room, father and Mira would sit side by side and press play together, letting Leora's voice fill the space between them. Sometimes Mira cried, remembering moments captured on tape. Sometimes she laughed when her mother's words held humor. And sometimes she just sat in silence, holding her father's hand tightly, as if reminding herself that he was still there. The cassettes didn't destroy them, as the father had feared. Instead, they forced them to face the truth and offered a chance for healing. It wasn't easy, and it probably never would be. But for the first time since Leora's death, the father felt hope. Hope that he and Mira could find common ground. Not as a perfect father and daughter, but as two people bound by love, a shared past, and the memory of the woman who gave them both strength. Looking back, the father understood that secrets hold immense power, but truth can be even stronger. Leora kept her secret out of love, but it was the truth that opened the door between father and daughter. It reminded them that family isn't just about lineage or biological ties, but about loyalty, willingness to sacrifice, and the choice to stay together even when leaving seems like the easiest option. He hoped this lesson would stay with his daughter. Love isn't always neat and simple. Sometimes it brings chaos and pain, but it's also what helps them get through the darkest times.